Good afternoon. This is Holly Rainwater with Spark TS, and we welcome you to today's webinar in regards to the 219 plan document and how to create it. We wouldn't be able to do this without our technical assistance in the background with Jessica Kelly, and we've also have Georgia Bowen here as well. I wanted to quickly start out just to remind everybody we are a third-party administrator here at Spark TS. Which also does random generation, lab, MRO, background checks, regulatory compliance, and we are committed to technology with our Rail Tasker and People Tasker software solutions for drug and alcohol testing. And if you're a member of the Short Line Association, we do have member discounts for all of our members. Again, Spark TS also is one of the first trainers to complete the NDASA's oral fluid testing trainer course. As those regulations change and become into effect and we get some certified labs, we'll be able to go ahead and become a trainer and lead the industry with oral fluid drug and alcohol testing. I am Holly Rainwater, the Vice President of Drug and Alcohol Programs here with Spark TS, and I also have our TPA Account Manager, Georgia Bowen, on today with us as well. Oops, it looks like, Georgia, I didn't update your phone numbers. Apologize for that. Her email is georgia@sparkts.net, but we are ready to walk through how to do a 219 plan. As the regulations are broke up, and I just wanted to verify this before we started. Part 40 is all from ODAPC, the Office of Drug and Alcohol Testing Compliance. What the Part 40 does is it explains how we do the drug testing procedures as employers, as employees, and as service providers. We've got the urine collectors are in there, the breath alcohol technicians are in there, the drug and alcohol testing labs are there, medical review officers are there, and also our substance abuse providers are there. And as you can see, it says nothing about random testing. Each DOT agency reviews what is required for the random plans. And any specific DOT agency regulation like pre-employment testing requirements or suspicion requirements in that part of the regulation. Specific to railroad, all of the railroad requirements are found in 219. They talk about the agency rules specific to accidents, injuries, and fatalities. Everything that we're talking about today is specific to railroads. Any other agencies like FMCSA, FTA, those policies would be different. The regulations really for Part 219, you can find everything here at this website, and we'll be logging into this website here, in a little bit. I apologize. And in the side of this portal, you'll see the regulations themselves, the model drug and alcohol testing compliance plans and policies. There's also in here prescription and over-the-counter medication information and post-accident testing guidance. But we are really going to focus on the different alcohol testing compliance plans and policies. FRA developed different modules and their model plans to assist railroads and railroad contractors in complying with 219. You'll see here, this is when mechanical was brought in. We have the mechanical employee was in the new 219 plan. But I've seen some plans come back that don't have mechanical in them. Those are the older plans. Those plans are outdated. But if you look at your random plan and it does not discuss mechanical employees, you need to update your plan. Go in there, look, and you'll see if whether or not mechanical is listed as a regulated, is listed as a type of FRA regulated employer. In here, we've got the plan for small railroads. We've got the railroad compliance plan for contractors and for railroads. It's pretty easy to figure out if you're a railroad contractor and you don't have a rail line, you're in the contractor plan. If you've got a railroad, you're in the railroad compliance plan. But there are certain requirements to be a small railroad. Those regulations would include, whoops, did I miss it? I went too far, you guys. looks like I took it out. Oh, here it is. With the small railroad exceptions, it's going to pertain to railroads with 15 or fewer hours of service employees, and only to those that do not have joint operations with another railroad that operates in the U.S., except as necessary for purposes of interchange. When you have a small railroad exception, you're not doing the random testing, you're not doing cause testing, and there's no voluntary referral or coworker referral policies in them. What does that mean? You still do pre-employment, you're still going to do post-accident testing, and you're still going to do suspicion testing. If you have 3 people on your railroad and you do not interchange with any other railroad operator or other railroad that operates in the US, then you would be exempt from testing. And the way that you know what those 15 people are, they're hours of service employees. They don't include mechanical or maintenance away. So you're looking at train and engine, you're looking at anybody who's conductors, anyone who's hours of service. If you're a contractor and you only perform service for small railroads, if you are a contractor and you're only doing work for small railroads that have that exception, you're going to be exempt. But if you're a contractor with 1 person doing work for a class 1, you're not exempt. You're required to have a plan document. And then for the purposes of determining random testing rates as we go in here, you're going to decide if an individual performs covered service, maintenance away activities, or mechanical activities, and which category of regulated employees they correspond to a majority of the time. Let's look at signal maintainers. You might have a signal maintainer that has a CDL, or maybe that also does roadway worker functions. You're going to pick which category they do most of the time, and that's the random pool they would fall in. If they're driving 51% of the time and they are doing FMCSA work, they would be in an FMCSA pool, not a random pool. For a random plan testing plan, the regulations in 219 talk about the random plan, that each railroad must have a 219 plan and it must be approved by the FRA before they can implement random testing. If you've never had a random plan before and you're going to implement it, you have to make sure you send your plan document to the FRA and get it approved before you start testing under that random plan. And truthfully, the FRA has been doing a great job on getting the plans approved rather quickly. Believe it or not, I've had plans approved in 30 minutes. They are really diligent on getting those plans approved. I know a lot of people like to go in and just send stuff off to one of the FRA administrators, but the right thing to do is send it to the FRA/Drug and Alcohol Program email that the FRA has developed. You just email your plan there and they'll approve it from that plan. Let's go through and look at a couple of plans. Let's see here. Let me stop sharing my screen and reshare. Okay. Let's take a look at this plan document. I guess I should ask, can you see the plan document? I'm not exactly sure what I'm sharing, but you should see the Spark TS? Okay, yeah. Perfect. When you open the plan document on the website, actually, you're going to get those options of which plan you would like. In this situation, I picked the one for railroads. We're going to be the reporting railroad, and our railroad is called Spark TS. When you go in, you can upload your logo. You can go in here and you can see if you tab, this is the key, you have to tab through everything. Okay, I've had some people go in and just go in here and try to type and then enter and move down with their cursor. The best thing is to use the tab button. So you can tab in here, you can go ahead and put your company name in here. You're going to decide what is it. It's what type of you're going to put in the day that you're submitting the plan. We'll put today's date. You're going to put the date it's effective. Let's go January 1. We'll sneak it up here. And this is an important plan. Just leave this here because the FRA is going to approve this or put their date in here. And then you're going to say, is it an initial plan or is it a revision? If you're changing DERs, it's a revision. If you're new to regulated service, it's your initial plan. If you looked at your plan and you're like, oops, there's not mechanical on here, you're going to know, hey, this is a plan revision. I need to get my plan updated. Let's say it's a plan revision. And the key also when you're doing a plan revision is when you submit that to the FRA, keep track of what you're changing. When you send your document to the FRA, I think it's a great practice to go in and say, here's a list of the things that we changed. We changed the DER. We changed the SAP. We changed our random percentage. Lay it out, tell that story of what you've changed, and then attach your plan document. We're going to do a plan revision. And we're going to tab down to the next one, maybe. It's going to give you all of the regulations. Everything in here is regulatory language. We're going to put the name in here. We're going to ask for your company name. This just says this is our company. This is that we are going to follow 219 requirements. You're going to do things like now put in the name of your railroad, okay? This might just be like a general number, but you can put the name of the railroad and any identifying information. Now, this information is critical now, the next part, the DER. So what the FRA is going to want to ask you is, can I contact this person 24/7? Because if there's an incident, let's just say that you operate and it's 7 o'clock at night and you're home and you list your office number as the DER, guess what? If they call that office number and your railroad's been involved in a post-accident event and they can't reach you, I guarantee they're not going to be very happy. Make sure that the number listed on here is a 24/7 number. And I know a lot of companies might have like a cell phone for the DER and a 24/7 number. Then you're going to want to add that as like additional notes. Our 24/7 number, oops, I can't type, 24/7 number is, and then just put that number down there. That's a good practice because they're going to want to be able to talk to somebody if there's an event. Think of it that way. If there's an incident and they need to get a hold of me, what number do I have? Then you're going to want to add an assistant DER on here as well. And then your medical review officers. I recommend with the medical review officers, I use 2 different medical review officers for our TPA clients. That's completely up to you. But so we've got both of them listed on here as well. Next, you're going to want to add your laboratory information. I've got a lot of clients that put 2 labs on here just in case maybe there's not, somebody doesn't have paperwork. Maybe a clinic doesn't have CRL paperwork, but they have Quest paperwork. Then you could do the paperwork on Quest forms and not worry about altering things like that. But you put your labs in here and then you add your SAP. I do know that a lot of smaller railroads and specifically railroad contractors don't have a SAP. I use this verbiage. Like here, for example, for my SAP, Spark TS will utilize an online directory for substance abuse professionals. This provider list can be found at www.saplist.com. There's other provider lists that are out there as well that have certified SAPs. And then you can go to that list and then you can pull up SAPs in your area. If you have an employee assistance program, that's a great referral place for SAPs. You just want to make sure that they have SAPs. Otherwise, this is a generic statement that you could utilize. And I do have a lot of companies that utilize that. In regards to now, we're going to get to the total number of employees, and this is where the tabbing is really important because the tabbing is going to come up with your total number of employee. And here's that spot for mechanical employees. So you're going to look at your hours of service employees, how many you have. You'll tab down to your roadway workers, how many you have, how many mechanical you have. And then there's, whoops, it's really, the tabbing is a lot of fun. It's going to then tab down to and change that number of employees. Then we're going to go in here and it's going to ask you for your regulated contractors. If you've got more than 5 or if you've got 10 contractors, you're not going to want to put them all in the document itself. There's an attachment at the back, so you can add those to the addendum in the back. But for example, so I added my regulated contractor here, Holly's Contracting Company, and they perform roadway worker functions for us. Here's their address and here's their contact information. Now remember, with your contractors, they're on here if they're regulated service. What does that mean? They also need to have a plan. Then you want to make sure if they're on your contractor list that they're also compliant with 219. That's a little bit of a tidbit to remember. And then also with the railroad, it's going to ask if you operate on tracks of another railroad, and then you're going to add that railroad. Let's say we're running on CN for 45 miles. The big difference, this is going to be different if I look at that contractor plan. The contractor plan isn't going to have this information on here, but it's going to ask what railroads you work for, and it's going to ask you if you've got subcontractors. If you're a contractor, so here we're Holly's Contracting Company, and if I've got subcontractors, I need to put them on there. What does that mean for you as a railroad? They also have to be compliant. So your subcontractors that are working regulated service need to be compliant as well. Okay. Now we're going to get into, excuse me, I have a little tickle in my throat. Now we're going to get into the meat of the plan. We're going to look at pre-employment testing. As we scroll down, you're going to make a decision. Are you going to do federal pre-employment alcohol testing, or are you not going to do federal alcohol testing? If you're going to say yes to this, then for every FRA pre-employment test, a federal alcohol test needs to accompany that drug test. The drug test is automatic, right? If you're going to do an alcohol test, you need to make a determination, am I going to do that alcohol test or not? I would say I've got a lot of railroads that say yes, some that say no. If you're not consistent, that's when that problem occurs. If you're not consistent, that's when you're putting yourself at risk for a violation. That's your first decision point. Now you're going to go into suspicion testing. That's going to say, hey, you're required to do suspicion testing. It talks through that. Then it's going to go into reasonable cause testing. Here's another decision point. I would say this is the second most critical decision point. You got the alcohol, you've got reasonable cause. Is your railroad going to conduct reasonable cause drug and alcohol testing for federal? This is going to be all under 49 CFR Part 219.403. What this means, if you have an incident under 219.403 that meets one of those requirements, if you mark yes and you decide to test, it would have to be under DOT authority. Let's say a lot of the old cardinal rule violations fall into this area, on track without authority, all of it's some major violations in there. So take a look at 219.403. That could be a whole nother webinar. But take a look at that and decide, if I'm going to test when any of these events occur, I am going to do federal. Okay, some of the reasons for doing yes to federal testing would be, let's take a look at certification. If you have an employee, let's say you're training an engine that has a positive test and you've done a federal cause test, now they're decertified. They have a positive test or their certification is suspended. You want to keep that in mind, and that's also going to follow them to the next railroad or regulated contractor they work for. Downfall would be, let's say you do federal cause testing and you've got a utility crew that's driving a vehicle in the yard and hits a pole, okay? They're not following the track. They just made a bad decision and hit a pole. And you're like, oh, they're federal employees, so I'm going to do a federal cause test. The answer is probably no, that's not a federal violation. Under 219.403, it should be company. If you did federal, now you're at risk of a violation. And if somebody tested positive, they had a positive test under federal authority, that probably should not have occurred. It would have not been a reason to test under 219. Think about that. Now, we look at the no side of it. Why would I want to pick no here? Here, we're located here in Minnesota. If I've got all of my headquarters in Minnesota, I'm going to look at the Minnesota laws for testing. And Minnesota, for example, has several rules that say you can't test if there's no injury. You can't test if there's no rule violation, or not rule violation, excuse me, no monetary damage. If I have an incident that occurs, let's say I have someone that goes on track without authority, okay? In that situation, I don't have an injury and I don't have monetary damage. So guess what? Under Minnesota law, I shouldn't test them. If I tested under company, I could be in risk of that state law, having an issue with the state law. But if I tested under federal, I don't need to meet those requirements. I can go ahead and move under federal. There's a lot of things to consider here. Just make sure what you do is consistent. And if you are, again, go back to 219.403 and look at what those definitions are. I believe there's 18. Just make sure you have a good understanding of that. Let's see here. Post-accident's all going to be the same. Now we're in random drug testing. Now here's where we're going to make more decision points. Our next area. Now we're going to talk through when we do random testing, what percentage we're going to test everyone at. Covered service. Now we're talking about hours of service. Their minimum rate is 25/10 right now, 25 for drug, 10% for alcohol. In here, you're going to put in what percentage you're going to test them at. For example, in this situation, we're going to do the minimum, 25%, but we're going to go ahead and test them also for alcohol, okay? We could do 10% alcohol, and a lot of people do that. But a reason that we would do maybe both would be the fact that if a manager sends somebody in for a random test and they were drug and alcohol and they forgot the alcohol and they sent them in just for a drug test, we're putting ourselves at risk for a violation because we have not followed our plan. Keep that in mind. That would be one of the areas that I would consider thinking through that. And again, the alcohol test takes probably 10 minutes to complete if it's a negative test. It's not taking a lot of time, but it is a critical part of the random program. We're going to do the same for regulated service roadway workers. Their minimum is 25/10. Here again, we're doing 25/25. And then we've got, mechanical. Mechanical right now is still at 50/50. I haven't seen the 24 requirements for random testing yet come out from FRA, but right now it's at 50/25, and we've chosen to do 50/50 for that. In here also, we will also identify the testing pools that we have. Due to our size and our business model, we've decided to do 4 pools. We're going to do a train and engine pool, we have a covered service pool, roadway worker pool, and mechanical pool. You want to identify those pools. But this is where I would tell you, go back up to your number of employees. Oh, it's going to be a long roll here. We're going to go up to our number of employees and walk through it. Let's just say we change this and I have 5 hours of service employees. Maybe I have 20 roadway workers and 10 mechanical employees. Now I have 35 employees. I don't think I'm going to want 4 pools for 35 employees. You want to take a look at your business model. What makes sense here? In this situation, truthfully, you could have 1 pool, you could have 2 pools. I don't think I would have 3 pools because you'd have 1 pool with 5 people in it, but you want to walk through it. But let's say that you want to have 1 pool. You want all 35 people in the pool. You're going to test at the higher percentage because you cannot take that mechanical employee and test that pool at 25% because your minimum is 50, right? So you're going to go ahead, and if you're going to do 1 pool, you're going to just have 1 pool at 50%. Back at that where we just went in and we put in that 25/25, you're going to want to change that to what the minimum would be. Those are things to talk through. If you're not really sure what you want to do and you need to walk through them, speak with your TPA, call us, because there's a lot of things different scenarios that you can do. I also have clients that might take part, maybe if they've got 5 employees, they might put 5 in a consortium, and then the rest are in a standalone pool. That consortium would fall into with other regulated employers, and then they maybe have one that just works on their own, that they have their own pool. But you notice what I don't have in here is company. You don't put in your company pools in here. It's all federal. You'll put in your pools. The other things that you'll put in your pools, you're going to identify who is in the pool. In my train and engine pool here, I'm going to have conductors, engineers. In my covered service pool, I have my signal, my locomotive hostlers, yard masters in there that perform regulated service. In my roadway worker pool, I'm going to have maintenance away employees, and in mechanical, we'll have mechanical employees. If you just had one pool, you just put everybody who's in that one pool in there. Then we go down to random selection process, and this is actually your random generator. So you're going to put the information regarding your random generator in here. And if your TPA is doing it, your TPA would provide you that information. You'll want to go in here and then determine how you're going to make your selections by ID, train number, job number, etc. Put that in here. But if you are doing maybe like the T&E, the train and engine pool by job, you're going to want to be very specific and put that information in there. That the train and engine is by job number, and then everyone else is listed as ID number. Next question would be, are your pools in a consortium controlled by a third-party administrator? You put yes or no. And then if it is, so let's say that you are maybe in the Spark TS pool, then you would say yes. And then Spark TS would provide you the name of the pool. Like we have a Spark TS consortium, and we call it like DOT 50/50. So your TPA would provide you that information to put in here. If you have standalone pools, then you want to go in here and put yes. That means that you're the only company in there, so you're going to put yes. Next, you'd put in your TPA information. Here we put in Spark TS as a TPA, the contact person, and then we're going to put in that information that TPA provider does do. Then you're going to talk through how often your railroad is making selections, monthly or quarterly. In this situation, we're doing monthly. Let's say that you have maybe you have a smaller pool you do quarterly and a larger pool you do monthly. You'll want to specify that within your plan. If you're making quarterly selections, you're going to want to verify in here. It's going to say an objective procedure. What here they're going to want to say is that you are selecting at least one person each quarter. They don't want you skipping a quarter. They want you to do that. They want you to put in here that you are selecting at least one person a quarter. Next, you're going to determine if it's for drugs, alcohol, or both. We made the decision, drugs and alcohol, so it's very simple. You see, I'm not adding a lot of verbiage in here. I'm not saying Spark TS, blah, 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 blah. We'll test for drugs and alcohol. It's just selections will be for drugs and alcohol. I don't add any other verbiage in there. If you're doing something by the TPA is making those decisions, you can say this is determined by our random generator. So you want to just document that in there. Again, this isn't something that you're going to want to pick individually. You don't want to have the random generator pick 5 names and then you're saying, okay, I want him to do drugs, her drugs and alcohol. You don't want to do that. That random generator should be doing that. In this situation, again, we're monthly. Our window, 30 days, not to exceed the end of the month. This is the key here. If you're doing a quarterly, 90 days, not to exceed the end of the month. So add that in there, okay? So 90 or 30 days, not to exceed the end of the month. Provide additional descriptions of your random selection procedure. Unless you're doing something really odd, you can add that information in here. Otherwise, keep it blank and there's nothing else that you're doing. And then we go down and now we're going to talk through how you're going to notify your employees, okay? So we use a generic statement, the DER or the supervisor under the direction of the DER notifies the employee personally, instructing them to proceed to the collection location. Voicemails are not an acceptable method of notification. I've left this part out before and was asked, you don't specify whether or not I can leave the person a voicemail. The intent of this is so that when the DER or that supervisor informs that person, that they then immediately proceed to the collection location. If you leave them a voicemail and say, hey, it's Holly. Hey, you got a drug test today. I need you to go by 10. Okay, then they got the voicemail. And they're like, I'm going to pretend like I didn't get that. I'm just not going to go. There's no way that you can verify that was really what's really occurred. Like voicemails, and I would say emails are not an acceptable method of notification. However, you can tell them and then email them after the fact, but you want to get that notification in there. And some people may say the DER notifies the employee of instructing them. That's fine. You can have that in there, but I like, or the supervisor. Then the DER can escalate that down or delegate that down to others. Our testing procedures, this is all that part 40, right? That's not going to change. Now we get into non-negative results. Here's the next area where we're going to go ahead and put in a decision point. We're going to talk about negative dilutes, okay? 219 also says that we need to define how we're going to handle drug test results that come up diluted if they're negative. You can say, I'm going to recollect them. You can say that I only want to recollect pre-employment. You can say, I'm going to recollect everything except randoms. You can make that determination. You're just going to specify that out here. And then FRA does like to see, unless otherwise directed by the MRO, under direct observation, because there can be a situation where the MRO says, hey, you need to do a retest because their creatinine is way off and we just need to verify that they're not cheating. They're going to do a recollect under direct observation. Just specify that out here. In regards to negative dilutes, it can really go either way. I think with oral fluids, that'll make a difference too, because you really shouldn't have any diluted oral fluid testing. But just make sure you're doing it the same every time. If you've got a pre-employment that comes in, your pre-employment comes in dilute, do a second test and do that test as soon as possible. It doesn't mean wait 3 weeks and do it. You do it as soon as possible. Direct them to go in, do immediate recollection. The other thing here is you just want to make sure that it's done correctly, and you don't want to do more than 2. Because if you do, let's say they have dilute on 1, dilute on 2, you don't send them in for a third, because the regulations specify if there's 2 negative dilutes, they're still negative. That's a decision point. And again, that's a whole nother topic we can go through negative dilutes on. In regards, then we talk through prescription medication, and then we go through positive tests. This is another area that you would make a decision point. So the FRA is asking, what are you going to do if somebody has a positive test? Okay. The thing is, if you're putting it in here, then it's in stone. So you're going to have to follow what your plan says. If you go in here and say, if somebody has a federal alcohol test of 0.02 but less than 0.04, and you write terminate, then you need to terminate every single one that comes under that part. Okay. If you're not exactly sure, or that maybe you've got a union environment and you've got to follow the different procedures, just put it under company policy. Our procedures are followed under company policy. Okay, the regulations require us to move that person from service for the shift, so you can put that in there. And then this is the HR and me coming out. Additional measures may follow depending upon circumstances, up to and possibly including dismissal, because that could be a terminable offense. Same with a federal alcohol test, right? Procedures are followed under company policy. Employee will be removed from service, and then we're going to do this. Add referred to a SAP. Add referred for an evaluation for a SAP. And then again, I've added that additional disciplinary measures. Again, now if you've got, in this situation, a conductor or engineer, some of those procedures would be also under 240 and 242 with their certification. Now for positive drugs, the same thing. They're removed from the shift and they're referred to as SAP. Just be careful what you put in there. Unless you're 100% terminate, I wouldn't just put that in there. You want to make sure that you've got some leverage in there, to some room to move around. If you change that, remember, if you're changing part of your plan, you need to resubmit it back to the FRA. Keep that in mind. Okay, now we're going to head to the referral policies. I'm not going to go into too in depth with these policies on the coworker referral and non-peer referral policies, but this is where we're going to talk about who can refer in what circumstances. If you have a situation for referrals, what type of referrals are you going to want? And it says including supervisory, but think about it this way. In this situation, it's really, you want to go through, if I've got a coworker referral, who can refer them? Coworkers, right? If you have a supervisor that is working with an employee that is under covered service right now and they're working and the supervisor suspects them of being under the influence, they can't refer them for voluntary referral or coworker referral. We have to do that suspicion. A really good way is just put in there, they're going to refer, their coworkers are going to refer them. Some people might say that family members are another referral source. I would say almost in that situation, it depends, because you could have somebody calling in, maybe you've got an upset ex-husband that calls in and says, hey, my wife, she's out at the bar every night and she's doing a line of Coke almost every night. I know she's coming to work under the influence. That's not a referral that you're put on notice to check out and see what's going on. You could have somebody that's just really being belligerent and really upset at that other person. But there are situations where maybe you have somebody, a spouse, call in and say, hey, we'll use me for example. My spouse would call in and say, hey, Holly, she's in treatment. She can't come to work. That's different, right? That's, a medical thing. We're looking now at a different type of referral. So this is looking really at who's going to refer them while they're on duty. Here we got, they don't accept non-peer referrals. When you accept the referral, you have to contact a drug and alcohol provider. 5 days is a nice number, right? I see a lot come in with 3 days, but 5 days gives you that weekend, because it doesn't say business days, it just says 5 days. Then we're going to walk through, do you require a return to duty medical evaluation? If you're having somebody come back, medical evaluation is a good thing to go through. You can put yes. If you put no, they don't go through medical evaluation. Are you going to compensate that person if they're referred? A lot of people put no, because maybe that referral would be covered under a short-term disability plan. Some put yes, but just put in here what it's going to be. It's going to ask for your DAC. Again, this is where you're going to come in and you're going to have, maybe some people put their EAP in here. A DAC is not a SAP. Just a real quick definition of a DAC. A DAC handles non-violations under DOT. A SAP only handles violations. If you have a person who has a positive alcohol test, you refer them to a SAP. If you have a person who raises their hand and says, hey, I need to go to treatment, you don't send them to a SAP, because they're going to follow the violation protocol. You send them to a DAC, a drug and alcohol counselor. But a SAP can be a DAC. For example, I'm a SAP, which means I'm also a DAC. But the real crux of the matter is the documentation that they provide when that person comes back to work. When that person comes back to work, the DAC will have different documentation than if they were a SAP, because a SAP process to bring somebody back to work, and actually just to go through that SAP process, is quite detailed. And here we put in, we will use the online directly for drug and alcohol counselors, because a DAC meets the credentialing and qualification requirements of a SAP. We will use the online directory for SAPs. It can be found here. That's a generic one that you can use if you don't have an EAP. Are we going to allow somebody assistance if they've already been under the coworker referral or voluntary referral? Or it does not apply. If you're going to give somebody one bite of the apple, if they get in trouble, or if they ask for assistance one time for a voluntary referral, this allows them to just do one chance to get help on their own. If they have a second, then this would not apply to them. If you were going to say, I'm going to give them as many chances as they want, then you would put no here. And then you could say it's unlimited. Okay. Unlimited number of times they can call this app. Again, I could go into this for a long time, but you want to really think about this. What if you're going to give a number, what would that number be? Think through that. In my experience, somebody who maybe has gone through treatment might, forgive the term, fall off the wagon, but might need to go back through the program again if they are having issues. Keep all that in mind when you're writing your policy. This question here has two parts. The referral policy may provide the rule of confidentiality is waived if the employee refuses at any time to cooperate in the DAC's recommended course of treatment. Okay, what that means is Holly goes to the DAC and all of a sudden Holly disappears. She just stops calling the DAC. These programs are confidential, but in that situation, that EAP provider can come back and say, hey, Holly's disappeared. This is what's happened. She referred herself and she didn't do this. Now you can set up an investigation that says Holly voluntarily referred, because you would never tell anybody that before. Holly voluntarily referred, her confidentiality is waived, and now she's missing in action. They're not going to fall under that policy anymore. And then the second, if it's later determined after the investigation to have been involved with alcohol-related disciplinary offense growing out of subsequent conduct, right? Let's say this is the rule of confidentiality is waived if the employee is determined after investigation to have been involved in a drug and alcohol offense. Let's say that we have a reasonable cause test. Okay, Holly goes in, she has a reasonable cause test, and then the next morning she calls and says, I want to voluntarily refer myself. Okay, great, you can voluntarily refer yourself, but then that test comes back positive. Then guess what? Now that confidentiality rule is waived. If that alcohol or drug violation was imminent, then you're definitely going to want to ensure that you remove that rule of confidentiality. Number 3 is asking you if they need to invoke their voluntary referral program when they're not working, and that was yes, because you don't want them to come in drunk, go to their supervisor and say, hey, I need to refer myself. I'm here drunk right now. You don't want that to happen. They need to do it either off duty. The policy may require successful return to duty medical. Again, I recommend saying yes. And then any other optional provisions. A lot of people won't take this coworker referral and policy and write their own policy. Then you just include that information in here. The rest, really, guys, we've almost gone through it all. This is just some verbiage. I think it's important to read this verbiage because it really has a lot what's pulled out of 219 and how you should be doing your testing. There's some good stuff in here that you might need to bring into an investigation sometime. Talks about you keep your records for a minimum of 2 years. It includes what you need to know about drug testing, which you need to have. Your employees need to have that. What FRA has done is said, if you include this in the policy, you meet the requirements of that education component in the regulation. And then back here, we've got that appendix too, where you can go in here and add additional information. Maybe you can in here, if we've got more than 5 regulated employers or contractors, you can add that information in here. There's a lot of stuff in here to make decision points, but I've tried to hit as many as I could. Georgia, I can kick it back to you. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, we have 2 questions. One is just, can we get a copy of the slide deck? And
Yes.
The other is pertaining to the 40.25. It says, would the 40.25 form still need to be completed before the FRA 219 plan is approved?
No, so that's a good question. If you don't have your 219 plan approved and you submit it, you can do everything except do the random generation. Of course, you're going to want to make sure if you're a new railroad, you're going to go through that entire process with the FRA, but you're going to want to make sure that you're doing everything else. If you've sent in your plan for approval, you can do the pre-employment testing, you can do the 40.25s, you can do everything else, but you cannot do the random draw. It has to be approved by the FRA. But you can definitely do 40.25s. The other part is, remember, to Part 40, is ODAPSI. The 40.25s are technically under ODAPSI, not the FRA. The other thing I wanted to talk through is the educational requirement. The plan document itself is there, right? But there's also in the regulation 219 also says that you need to give mechanical employees a hard copy of your plan. Make sure, don't just say, go to our website and download it. You need to actually give them a copy of your plan so that they have a hard copy of it. And then you have to do that for a minimum of 2 years after March 4, 2022, because that was when the last regulatory change occurred, and that was with mechanical. They did this also back in 2017 when we added roadway workers in. So that was out there for 3 years. Now you don't have to give them a hard copy. But so you want to give them that. And again, what you need to know about drug testing is a great resource that you can provide your employees. Now, one thing here at Spark TS2, what you can do is if you are subscribed to our training program, we do have a what you need to know about drug and alcohol testing training course that the employees can take. It just walks through the educational requirements and then has a copy of the plan there for your employees, and then they verify that they received it. That's one thing that they could also do as well. But that's an important part of the regulations. Just having that plan isn't enough. You have to make sure that you're educating your employees and by giving them a copy of that plan. How about other questions?
So far, none have come in.
Okay, good. If you come up with any other questions, feel free to definitely let us know. Maybe we can walk through them. But there's some decision points in there that really you can just really look at your business. Look at if you're doing pre-employment alcohol testing and you've done it for 10 years and have not had one positive test, I might say, is it worth it? One positive test might be enough to say, yeah, it is. Or if you're not doing it and you have a lot of alcohol violations, maybe it's something to consider. Just walk through every step and ask yourself those questions. I just wanted to note 2024 is almost here. We will continue to update you on all of the FRA regulations that are coming through and Part 40 regulations. If there are items that you are interested in knowing more about, let us know. We'll do a webinar on it. Keep that in mind as well. If you have any questions, go ahead and give us a call, shoot us an email. We'll definitely help you out. And I thank you all for joining today and have a safe day.